Atticus told me to delete the adjectives and I'd have the facts. Harper Lee, To Kill a Mockingbird. This is AMI Audiobook Review. I'm your host, Jacob Szymanski. When I picture an author, I see a recluse living in a messy as hell bachelor or a cabin in the woods or something with post-it notes all over the place. They drink borderline dangerous amounts of black coffee. And these authors, they dress like university professors even though they never leave the house. They're actually brilliant people bursting with creativity. But what comes bursting out more often than not is overwhelming self-doubt. The real thing that's holding them back, though, is ridiculous lower back pain and late-stage carpal tunnel syndrome. That's my uneducated idea of what authors are like. But somebody who knows authors, and I mean really knows authors, is Becca Syme. Becca's worked with thousands of authors from around the world. She has a master's degree in transformational leadership. She's the founder of the Better, Faster Academy, and a program for authors to improve themselves in every aspect of the industry. She's also the author of the popular Quit Books nonfiction series, again, aimed at authors looking to improve themselves. She also hosts the QuitCast podcast series to accompany that Quit Books series. Becca, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for making time.
Yeah, thank you. I'm excited to be here.
How off base was I with my portrayal of authors?
So there's absolutely a type of author that is 100% exactly correct, right? Like all authors are a little bit different. Like there's kind of multiple different types of authors, but that one, I was like, oh no, I can see that person and I can actually think of some people who
You have a
fall
name in
into
mind.
that exact type. Yeah, that was great.
Just bent over a desk,
Yeah.
just struggling to realize that they're actually incredibly talented. Like they started doing it for a reason. And it's funny, there's a bunch of different archetypes of these authors, but at least that's the one that comes to my mind. And you've worked with, I think I saw over 4,000 authors throughout your time doing the work that you do. And how did you get to find yourself in this niche of helping authors work their way through the publishing industry? Because it's very specific. How did you get to that point?
Yeah, I was originally doing consulting in other areas, right? Like I had this capacity as a success alignment in organizations and communication using the Clifton Strengths, which is like a success orientation metric. And so I had all of this experience, but on the side, I was writing. I always wanted to be a novelist. And so I started writing in, I think 2009 was my first kind of contract. And then went independent published in 2012. And I had all these friends who were just beside themselves about different things. And I was sort of like, oh, you don't need to worry about that because, and then I would explain from my alignment work in the past, like why that's okay, or that you can question the premise of that assumption that you have that you can't be successful in this way. Like the most common, just from the archetype that you were describing at the beginning, right? The most common part of that is correct is the crippling self-doubt. And so authors have this just like desire to be better, and it makes them be very unsure of themselves and insecure about the decisions they make because there also are no rules that are like actually true about what it takes to be a good writer. And so I think there's enough variability that it causes them to have a lot of self-doubt. And I just started saying like, well, there are actually patterns and reasons why these things can and should happen. You can still have success this way. You can maximize success this way. And then I just started like doing it more and more and more to the point where I was doing it so much I had to formalize it. So I had to like make a course, make a business, do a book. Like everything that I did was sort of in response to the work that I had done working for people. So it was just kind of a cascade, I think.
Huh. So you finding yourself in this business of working with authors is just an alignment of
Hmm.
your skills that you developed through
Yeah.
education and also your passion of
Yeah.
writing. I think that's something a lot of people would love to do. Um, how would you describe your philosophy on how you work with authors?
So the question, the premise is really our core kind of philosophy. And the tagline on the QuitCast is anyone can tell you what worked for them, and they can say it might not work for you, but they can't tell you why. I can tell you why. So my
Huh.
philosophy is to try to understand why things are happening to people and whether or not what they're doing is going to lead them away from a success path or not, or is it possible that it's actually going to lead them toward a success path. So the fundamental assumption I have is that there are so many different success paths out there, but it's not easy for us to see or understand them. So I try to make them more visible so that people have more security in just walking the path that is for them towards the success that they'll have. But it's not intuitive for us to know that stuff. So I just kind of shine the light.
There seems to be a very common theme in authors, and that's that self doubt. Like I brought it up kind of as a joke in the introduction, but it seems to be a huge problem. Like, why is self doubt so prevalent amongst authors?
So, I mean, I think it's prevalent among a lot of creative people just because I
Yes,
coach
true.
also. It's interesting that I coach some
Mhm.
audiobook narrators. I coach some
Hmm.
actors, right? Like screenwriters, etc., songwriters, dancers, like all over creative fields. And people who have a lot of intuition struggle a lot to know that what they're doing is correct because they haven't really been formally taught how to do the things that they're doing. So we have this kind of natural biological instinct to look outside of ourselves to kind of sponge up how to correctly act and whether we're doing it right or not. And when you are not being kind of shown, like from either the industry or some kind of board or, like person in charge, that this is the way you should do it and this is the standard, you're going to not trust yourself because it's not natural for us to trust ourselves. That is a personality trait, right? So I think it's just the nature of being artistic where there aren't a lot of rules and guidelines, and then also just biological human nature to want to do it right, and then they're not being really like user manuals.
I mean, your QuitBooks series is as close as it can get to
Yeah.
essentially a user manual for being on an author.
Yeah.
To give people an idea of your series, the titles go as follows: Dear writer, you need to quit. Dear writer, are you in burnout? Dear writer, you're doing it wrong. And it goes along those lines.
Yeah.
But I'm curious to know, what are the issues that come up most often with your clients?
So a lot of it is rules that they have been taught that just aren't true. So,
Like
like, I'll
blanket
give a couple of
statements.
examples. If you're in writer circles, you'll hear things like you have to write every day. And then that becomes the rule by which we decide whether we're doing it correctly or not. But there are so many types of brains that don't function well when you try to force them to do the same thing every single day. They can't produce creativity every single day. So those types of people feel like they're doing it wrong and they just need to be told why it's happening. Like, why am I not able to write every day? It's not a danger zone. You're okay doing it that way. You can still be successful. And
Huh.
so that there are so many rules out there, and basically every rule that is taught, every single rule that's taught from any workshop stage ever has the bell curve of exceptions. And the problem is when you're talking about 38% or 34% or 45% of exceptions, when you look at the number of writers that are out there, 200,000 working writers, 2 million potential writers, that could be a million people the rule doesn't fit for. So if you don't know it's safe for you to be in the outlier zone, which again, it's not really outliers when it's 40% or 45% of people, it's safe for you to do that and still be successful because the rule doesn't apply to everybody.
And if the rule doesn't apply to everybody, what that's implying is that you're taking a personalized approach on how
Yes.
to make authoring work for yourself.
Mhm.
Because creativity and productivity are sometimes at odds with each other. Productivity is mechanical, creativity is the opposite of mechanical. And so, like, how do you manage that? A creative art like writing, but also figuring out how to do it productively. How do you do that?
Yeah, so productivity for me is contextual, right? It's like,
Hmm.
what is the best productivity that I can expect out of myself given who I am and all of the different expectations that are in my life and what I have, etc. So like a person who is free 8 hours a day is going to have different productivity expectations than somebody who is free 8 hours a week. And they're going to have different productivity expectations than somebody
Hmm.
who takes 3 months to write the best book that they can write versus someone who takes 12 months to write the best book that they can write. So then productivity becomes contextualized. It is, if I am this, and this in terms of what my expectations are, how do I be expecting myself to be the best that I can be and improve without holding myself accountable for being according to someone else's standard? Because I think the mythology around the productivity industrial complex is that there's sort of like one way to accomplish productivity, but again, it's the bell curve. It's there's 40% of people that just doesn't apply to. So 40% of people can't, well, more than 40% can't use SMART goals. 40% of people can't use tiny habits. 40%, right? Like all of these things that we have an
Hmm.
expectation is no, this is the rule. And then I would look at it and say, well, actually, if you study the real data, not just the things that people want us to believe because it's handy for us to believe that for whatever reason, but actually look at the real data. The real data says there is no one thing that works for everyone, and you need to find what works for you. So productivity is optimizable in that way, but it is not like it is not a one size fits all experience, right?
Optimizable, I think, is the key word here.
Yep.
So I think a lot of the value that you bring to your clients, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that often when you're working in a creative endeavor, you can sort of see where your issues, where your pitfalls are. You come in and you can point out things that are issues that they might have not have seen themselves. They would have never seen themselves. Like, what are those issues?
So things like if you're a person who has a lot of thinking strengths, you can't go on social media first thing in the morning, right? Because the way that you internalize your creativity is your brain needs a certain type of free space. I call it, well, so we use a lot of organic metaphors, right? So it's when my brain is the most fertile, I have to be able to give it the job that it needs to do in order to produce the outcome that I want, which is for the wheat to grow, right? So if I'm constantly trying to expect my brain to do the things that everybody else does, then I may get marginal results out of it, but it's not sustainable. It's not my best work. I'm not going to be happy. Like I'll eventually burn out doing that. Whereas if I shift into, let me, again, the optimization is if I have a need to process until I have certainty, then I have to give myself the free space with no input, no digital, especially digital input, and then allow myself to write when the creativity wheel has finished turning rather than being get up and just go to the manuscript or let me really quick check social media. Like, so you have to know about your brain what actually would optimize its creativity in order to be able to give yourself something sustainably excellent in the long term.
And if you start working after that creativity wheel has stopped turning, I think that's when burnout can come because you get frustrated because you're sitting
Yeah.
there in front of your computer and nothing's coming out.
Yeah.
That said, you must get that question all the time. How do you
Mhm.
get past burnout?
Oh, yeah.
Well, sorry, not just burnout, but like writer's block, because I think they go together.
Yeah, so writer's block for me, because again, like not all writer's block is a bad thing. Like for some people,
Huh.
writer's block is a it's a it's not a bug, right? It's a function.
Hmm.
So for some people, they should actually be getting blocked in their manuscript regularly while they're writing, because overcoming the block is how their thinking strengths work to process through their story. So they're actually writing the most optimized story by just allowing themselves to be blocked and then working through it and getting past it and accepting it, sort of as like, reduce your cortisol levels. Don't worry about being blocked. It doesn't say anything about you. You just got to do the work to get out of it, right? But burnout for me, when not writing comes from burnout, That
Mm.
typically is about you have expectations that you should have been able to do something that didn't happen. And those expectations are causing too much stress to your system. And this is making your system not be able to function. Or you are living in a late stage capitalist hellscape and we're all burned out. Or, you know what I mean?
Yes.
Like there are a lot of options that might be causing burnout. But it's never, and this is what's really fascinating, burnout doesn't happen because we work too hard. Burnout happens because we don't understand the exchange rate between how energy is produced and consumed. Like we don't understand the difference and we don't know for ourselves what makes me consume more of my energy, and what makes me consume more than I produce. Because if you can manage that, like we have an energy management book, right? If you can manage that balance, you can work pretty hard, pretty indefinitely if you constantly are aware of what drains you and what doesn't, and you minimize the drains.
The level of energy and thought and just pure time that authors put into books, I think sometimes goes understated and underappreciated. Like if I'm listening to a 20-hour audiobook, the author must have given years, like months, if not years of their time into that. And that comes with stress and a lot of energy and a lot of sacrifices for me to crank that out in 1 week. And I think that's where the appreciation comes in. And this is why it's great to have you on right now. This is a reader centric, consumer centric show. And so to get this like window into what it's like to be an author, and the commitment it takes to craft these stories, these messages, if it's nonfiction, what does the general public misunderstand about authoring?
How hard it is. Yeah. It just
Yeah.
how the sheer difficulty of producing something that's never existed before out of your own brain, right? It is a mammoth undertaking and it consumes people's lives. And I feel like because, when we see it on like a movie or a TV show or something, we see a lot of the sort of dramatic, glamorized parts, like the montages, right? But the
Mhm.
reality is like some people die because of this. Like some people are consumed and lose their focus and capacity because they can't do it anymore. And like yes, it's great fun and it's wonderful for some people, but there's a reason why I run a seven-figure coaching business, right? Like it is extremely difficult and it's exceptionally difficult to do at a high level because that's actually the other thing that is the biggest misunderstanding I think people have is that it's so much easier to do when you're making $1 million as an author.
Is it not? It
Yeah,
sounds like it would be. You
it
have
is
$1 million.
so much harder.
How
Like
so?
because you now have so much responsibility to produce the thing that you have produced in the past. Is sort of like if you've ever in sports heard of the yips before,
Yes.
right?
Mhm.
Like basically it's very, very easy to get the yips about making a whole bunch of money because again we come with crippling self-doubt, and that self-doubt doesn't go away when your bank account increases, it gets worse. Not only that, but now you have to manage all of the marketing, all of the people. Like when you're making a million plus or 2 or 3 5 10 million, you're also a manager. Now you're running a business and you're running a
Mm.
marketing and influencing business. And then in addition to that, there's all the public scrutiny and the social media pressure and the worries of what if my fans think I don't like them? What if I disappear because I need to and they abandon me? Like it is absolutely more difficult to do when you're making more money. There are things that become
Huh.
easier, but it is exponentially more difficult to do when you're making more money.
I'm just thinking of the business side here. So,
Mhm.
say hypothetically, I wrote 3 books in a series, and it's very, very popular. It does incredibly well. There's a movie deal, and then I'm working on the fourth one, and I have the yips. It's just not coming out. What happens if I just don't write that book? Like, what are the consequences?
I mean, that's actually such a good question because I think a lot of authors think they will die
Yeah,
if they
will
don't
they? Well,
write
they're
the
not gonna
book,
die,
right?
right? It's
Yeah.
like-
They're like so terrified of what happens if you don't write the book, but actually almost nothing happens. Like you might, yeah, right? Like, okay, so let's just be, I'm not going to name any names because, you know, George R. R. Martin, but I'm not going to name any names. But
Yeah, it's not hypothetical. We're talking about George R. R.
hypothetically,
Martin.
what might happen, it might not even impact your bottom line. It might not really even impact how people feel about the books that are already out. It might not impact, like, you may not be the social media darling of the day on that Tuesday that you were supposed to release your book anymore, but it doesn't even necessarily mean that that anything else other than just you'll be really embarrassed. It'll be really frustrating to have to tell your editor that you didn't make the deadline. You're going to have to tell your peers you didn't make the deadline, but none of them are probably going to judge you anyway. It'll be fine. But it doesn't have the kind of impact that we think it has. It will absolutely change the trajectory of my career for sure. Well, but again, sometimes it will and sometimes it won't, because it depends is my most famous answer to every question. We have a drinking game on my like live calls where every time I say it depends, everybody does a drink, because it's just so consistent that I have to say that all the time. But like, it really is not a promise that is definitely your career's not going to be over. Like, for sure, your career's not. There's so many writers who have never written the next book, and we still talk about their books 25, 30, 50, 100 years later. But authors think that they will die if they don't finish the book. And a lot of times it really is just, okay, we got to get past whatever this is right now. And then in a year, you'll be able to come back to it and be okay again.
Well, George R. R. Martin gets so much hate for
S-
not having come out with
And
the
also
next
money.
book. And so much money. You're
Yeah.
right. Like, even if he doesn't, even if he never comes out with The Winds of Winter, he's going to be fine
Yeah.
monetarily, but I understand the pressure. He has a
Yeah.
lot of people, yours truly included, who really care about this story, and I really want to know how it finishes.
Yep.
And people are passionate, and it's beautiful that you have people passionate about something that just came out of your head like that.
Yeah.
It's really one of the most incredible things about writing.
Yep.
And to just let it end unceremoniously without a climax, without a resolution, is frustrating to a lot of people.
Mhm.
He's gonna survive though. Like, he will
Right. Like,
physically, monetarily be fine, but the
mhm.
mental pressure that comes with that
Yeah.
is unbelievable.
Well, not just that, but opportunity, right? Like, part of the reason that he hasn't written, I would assume, I don't know him personally, but I would assume a lot of it is he has so much opportunity to do other things. So, like, he doesn't have the kind of pressure to do that book in particular that he would have had if he hadn't had all these other TV, film, writing, editing opportunities.
Yes. And it's not just George R. R. Martin. There are lots of other
So
authors
many people.
that
Yeah.
are struggling to finish a series. And the worst thing is that I bet he has so many ideas in his head of other projects he wants to do, but his publishers are like, "Do you know how much money we're going to make if you come out with this book?"
Yeah.
Um, but enough about George R. R. Martin. Being an author, one of the unique things about it is it's a very lonesome art form. You pretty much do it on your own, with the exception of editors. Are editors the bad guys to authors? I've always wondered this, because you just
No,
have this person coming through criticizing. That sounds like a gross word. What's your take on this?
you definitely want criticism. Like,
Mm,
as an artist, like, you want critique because that's how you improve, right? So it's never fun, because I'm also an author, like, I'm also a novelist. It's never fun to open edits. I don't care how many years I've done this, 65 books in, and I still don't like opening my edit letters. But I'm so grateful for my editor, because just on like a personal level, I want to get better. And I'm never going to get better if I can't see my mistakes, because I can't have perspective on myself. So, like, editors in TV and movies, it's really fun to kind of set up editors and authors, or agents and authors, as like opposition to each other, because it creates good drama. And I'm sure there are people who have those
that's
experiences
so
in
true.
reality. But for me, it's like my editor is my biggest help, because they provide me with the perspective on my story that I wouldn't have otherwise had, about how it's landing with the readers, which is what I want it to do correctly.
Have you seen experiences between some of your clients and their editors, having friction?
Oh, yeah. Yep. Mhm. Yep. And it's usually either it's not a good fit, right? Like
Mm,
the editor is would be better off editing another genre,
got
but
it.
doesn't know
Mhm.
it, or there's a personality conflict between the two of them that just isn't landing right, or the style. So some editors give a lot of ideas and tell you what to do, and some editors ask questions. So, like, the difference in style can be a really big friction point between authors and editors, but it's really just a fit problem. There are very few editors in the world, I would assume, but very few editors I've ever met who I would say are problematic people, right? Like, they're really just, it's a fit thing.
And as we wrap up here, I wanted to ask you because I feel like you have a great window into the publishing industry. You work with so many people that are trying to break into it, make a living out of the publishing industry. How do you feel about its direction, where it's going, where publishing is going? Are you optimistic?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I
You
mean, I'm
are?
always
Mm,
optimistic. Yeah.
mm,
I think that every time we have a disruption, like every single disruption we've ever had in publishing has changed the direction of the industry a little bit, but ultimately what readers want is still the same. Like readers want the texture of the story. So there are absolutely always going to be options of getting stories in multiple different ways, and it's going to change and whatever, but for me, the hope comes not from the promise that any one individual person can make $10 million from publishing. The hope comes from we are no longer barred out by the gatekeepers. So we can decide if we want to keep publishing. So if you think about a metaphor of like chess, right? The most important piece on the chessboard is not the queen, it's the king. The queen has the most agility, right, as the best mover, but the king ends the game. And so, as long as you always understand that your ability to stay in the game of publishing is the king, then you will have all the freedom in the world to weather all of the publishing ups and downs that come over the next 10 years,
mm.
because as long as you can make it through the next 10 years, you'll be able to see what's on the other side that will be hopeful and optimistic. So for me, I'm like, who knows what's going to happen in the next 10 years? Some of us will have great experiences, some of us will have not great experiences. But what I do know is you always have agency to decide if you're going to keep publishing yourself, and if you're going to keep believing that at some point in the future, you could write something that would have a higher mass appeal than what you currently have. And there will always be openness in the market. Even saturated markets still have openness. So to me, I'm always hopeful for the future. I just also plan to not make a living from my writing until I am, if that
And
makes sense.
there are always going to be people that are going to be voracious readers.
Yep.
There's always going to be authors. The publishing industry isn't going anywhere. But excluding the business of it, how do you feel about literature? Like the books that are coming out nowadays? Do you subscribe to brain rot? Is that
Oh,
happening? Or do we still have good books coming out? Is what I'm asking.
Oh, we definitely do. Yeah, and I
I
think
agree.
I think even more so now. So in the disruption of the publishing industry from like 2010 to 2015, it was the all the indies came in the pool, right? And so there was this gold rush of kind of a capacity to sell that created a lot of speed desire in the industry. And I think what we're seeing now that some of that has retracted a little bit is that people are coming back to, okay, I don't have to worry about speed as much. Now I just need to worry about writing the best book that I can. There were always still great books being produced, and there are still going to be great books that will continue to be produced if authors will remind themselves that publishing is a lifetime game and not a short term game, like we're in a marathon, not a sprint, basically. And if we can set our eyes on the marathon as the goal, then we start being able to produce the best books that we can produce again, no matter how long they take. And that's what makes me hopeful about like great books being written, great works being produced and consumed. Is I think authors are now starting to realize that we can take the reins back from some of the speed worries that we had, and then be in more control of producing great books.
Optimism is in short supply, Becca, and
Yeah.
you came well equipped. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Of course. That was Becca Syme, writing coach and nonfiction writer. She's the founder of the Better, Faster Writing Academy. Check out her Quit Books series and the QuitCast podcast as well. That's all the time we have for today's edition of AMI Audiobook Review. AMI Audiobook Review airs weekends at 1 p.m. Eastern on AMI Audio and repeats every 6 hours. We're also available on all the big podcasting platforms, and that includes YouTube. You can email us feedback at audiobookreview@ami.ca. That's audiobookreview@ami.ca. And you can follow us on Instagram at AMI Audiobook Review. That's at AMI Audiobook Review. I'm Jacob Szymanski. Happy listening.